Picture a gateway where hope transforms into shadow, where thousands arrive seeking salvation only to discover they've crossed into their own grave. The year is 1847, and Liverpool stands as the British Empire's second beating heart, a maritime colossus processing the world's riches through its sprawling docks. Yet beneath the cobblestones of this gleaming port, a secret horror festers in the darkness, swallowing human souls by the tens of thousands. This is not ancient myth or Gothic fiction. This is documented reality, a catastrophe so profound that history itself seemed to conspire in burying it alongside its victims. Imagine arriving at a city that shimmers with promise from across the Irish Sea. The Albert Dock warehouses tower like monuments to prosperity, their red brick facades glowing in the winter light, crammed with exotic treasures from distant continents. Bankers tally fortunes in gaslit offices, while industrial barons toast their expanding empires. Liverpool radiates success, yet this glamorous facade conceals something monstrous stirring in the city's foundations. For while Britain celebrates its golden age, Ireland writhes in the grip of the third year of total agricultural collapse. The potato blight has stripped the land bare, transforming verdant fields into barren wastelands. Families subsist on grass and tree bark, watching neighbors perish from starvation. For these desperate millions, Liverpool represents more than a destination. It embodies their final, desperate gamble with survival itself. From January 1847 onward, the vessels arrive in relentless waves. These are not merchant ships laden with cargo. They're floating tombs the Irish call coffin ships, packed beyond capacity with skeletal refugees who've surrendered their last coins for passage. Each dawn brings another dozen hulls scraping against Clarence Dock, disgorging their human cargo onto Liverpool's overwhelmed quays. The immigrants stagger ashore, carrying nothing but disease, hunger, and the traumatic memory of everything they've lost. No relatives wait to greet them. No warm meals or prepared lodgings exist. They possess no currency, no connections, no comprehension of what awaits them. The local population responds not with compassion, but revulsion, averting their eyes from these walking corpses wrapped in filthy rags. Liverpool's authorities face this human deluge with characteristic bureaucratic detachment. They label it a transient situation, convinced the refugees will disperse naturally into other regions or simply vanish through some unspecified mechanism. But the ships keep materializing on the horizon, and the crowds continue swelling with each tide. Every available space fills with desperate bodies seeking shelter. The city's infrastructure begins fracturing under this unprecedented pressure. Housing capacity evaporates. Healthcare systems collapse. Sanitation networks overflow. Liverpool's officials miscalculate catastrophically, failing to recognize that this supposed temporary inconvenience represents an unstoppable flood about to drown their city in misery. As lodging houses reach maximum capacity and street corners overflow with refugees, Liverpool makes a decision that will haunt it for generations. The city begins forcing these unwanted masses downward, pushing them below street level into spaces where sunlight never penetrates. These underground chambers had previously served as storage cellars, but now they're repurposed as human warehouses. Damp stone staircases descend into the earth, leading to cramped vaults with ceilings so low that adults cannot stand upright. No windows exist, no ventilation systems. The floors consist of mud mixed with sewage seeping through porous brickwork. Here, in these subterranean chambers that locals begin calling the Black Hole, Liverpool conceals its most shameful secret. The name itself carries sinister accuracy, for anyone pushed into this darkness seems to disappear from existence, absorbed into a void from which few emerge. By summer's arrival, Liverpool confronts a truth it can no longer ignore. The refugee crisis has not dissipated as predicted. Instead, it intensifies with terrifying momentum. July and August bring scorching heat that transforms the underground cellars into something far worse than mere shelters. They become pressure chambers where human suffering reaches unimaginable dimensions. Descending those slippery stone steps means entering a realm where the normal rules of existence cease to apply. The stench hits first, an overwhelming mixture of unwashed bodies, accumulated excrement, and decomposing rodents trapped beneath the floorboards. Your eyes struggle to adjust to the absolute darkness, but adjustment becomes irrelevant when there's nothing to see. Inside these vaults, 30 or 40 souls pack into spaces designed for storing goods, not sustaining life. The air itself becomes toxic, a thick soup of recycled breath, disease particles, and methane rising from the sewage-soaked floor. Each inhalation fills your lungs with oxygen that's already passed through countless other bodies. No fresh breeze penetrates these depths. The only indication of day versus night comes from temperature fluctuations and the muffled thunder of footsteps pounding the streets above your head. Medical investigators who brave these conditions in 1847 document scenes they struggle to describe in professional language. Their reports use terms rarely seen in official documents, comparing the cellars to premature graves, where the occupants remain barely alive, breathing, yet already entombed. The heat of summer transforms these chambers into killing mechanisms. Bodies collapse from oxygen deprivation the moment they reach the bottom of the stairs. Others succumb more gradually, their systems simply shutting down in the suffocating atmosphere. Death arrives silently in the darkness, so quietly that living occupants continue sleeping beside corpses for hours before anyone notices. Discovery comes only when decomposition produces a stench overpowering even the cellar's usual reek. No violence occurs, no weapons appear. The space itself becomes the executioner, a slow and methodical killer, leaving no one accountable for the mounting casualties. But asphyxiation represents merely the opening act of this tragedy. The cellars become perfect incubators for epidemic disease. Typhus spreads first, carried by lice thriving in the filth and overcrowding. Victims experience burning fevers that make them thrash violently in delirium, their cries echoing through the stone chambers. Cholera follows close behind, transmitted through the contaminated water pooling on the cellar floors. This disease shows no mercy, draining bodies of fluid so rapidly that healthy adults transform into desiccated husks within hours. Dysentery joins the assault, turning digestion into agony and further contaminating the already polluted environment. These diseases don't simply kill individuals, they sweep through the crowded cellars like wildfire through dry timber, claiming entire families within days. Liverpool's hospitals face impossible circumstances. The facilities overflow so completely that patients lie stacked in hallways, multiple bodies sharing single beds. Yet even this overcrowding applies selectively. The Irish poor discover themselves turned away at hospital entrances, deemed contagious risks, rather than patients deserving treatment. Medical staff view them not as human beings requiring care, but as vectors of disease threatening the respectable population. If you found yourself trapped in those cellars, watching loved ones succumb to preventable illness, while the city's medical resources remained barred to you, how would you maintain hope? How would you explain to your children why help refuses to come? The death carts begin their endless rounds through Liverpool streets. Day and night, they rumble along collecting bodies from the cellars, piling them like cordwood for transport to overwhelmed cemeteries. The drivers develop calluses from handling corpses, their expressions hardening into blank masks of indifference. This becomes routine labor, as mundane as delivering coal or hauling refuse. Liverpool is not merely housing refugees anymore. The city has become an organism digesting them, breaking down their bodies through disease and neglect, then expelling the remains through its burial grounds. The black hole functions as the city's stomach, a dark chamber where the unwanted are compressed and consumed. Consider the mathematics of this catastrophe. Over 300,000 Irish refugees passed through Liverpool during 1847. Tens of thousands never leave, their journeys terminating in those underground tombs. The exact death toll remains unknown, because authorities keep no comprehensive records of cellar deaths. These victims disappear into statistical oblivion, erased not just from life, but from historical memory itself. The prosperity Liverpool celebrates is literally constructed atop mountains of anonymous corpses. Can you fathom existing as a living person with dreams and memories, only to vanish so completely that no evidence of your existence survives? Autumn's arrival brings no relief, only a chilling transformation in how Liverpool processes death. By September and October of 1847, mortality has become so routine that it ceases provoking emotional response. The city's burial infrastructure collapses under the sheer volume of bodies. Coffin manufacturers work around the clock, yet cannot satisfy demand. Desperate measures emerge from this crisis. Carpenters construct coffins with removable bottoms, allowing a single box to be reused indefinitely. Grave diggers lower the coffin into the pit, release the corpse through the hinged base, then haul the empty container back to the surface for the next customer. Even this grim efficiency proves insufficient. Cemeteries like St. Mary's abandon individual burials entirely. Workers excavate enormous trenches in advance, then stack hundreds of bodies inside, without ceremony or documentation. No headstones mark these mass graves. No names get recorded. No prayers get spoken. The dead are processed as quickly as possible, not to honor their memory, but to create capacity for tomorrow's casualties. Thousands of immigrants die completely alone, without family present or final rites performed. They descend from the coffin ships, get shoved into the underground cellars, then get dumped into unmarked pits. Liverpool doesn't merely consume their physical bodies. The city devours their very identities, erasing them from history as thoroughly as clerical errors get struck from ledgers. These souls never truly arrived in England. They simply dissolved into its soil, leaving behind neither graves nor stories, nor any proof they existed at all. Throughout this nightmare, Liverpool's authorities possess detailed knowledge of every horror unfolding beneath their streets. Medical inspectors submit comprehensive reports describing the cellars in meticulous detail, documenting the sewage, the overcrowding, the breeding grounds for disease. These documents make clear that relatively simple interventions like improved sanitation and reduced occupancy could save thousands of lives. Yet instead of urgent action, those in power choose calculated silence. The justifications never vary. Resources are limited. Budgets cannot accommodate such expenditures. Reforms cannot happen immediately. Furthermore, the victims themselves get blamed for their suffering. The poor are accused of choosing filth, of moral degeneracy, of reproducing irresponsibly. Disease gets reframed not as environmental consequence, but as personal failure. When society's leaders decide that saving lives offers no profit, when human beings transform into inconvenient numbers and reports, what does that reveal about civilization itself? The black hole persists not because elimination is impossible, but because it serves useful functions. It provides a convenient repository for people society prefers not to see, absorbs labor nobody else wants to perform, and hosts deaths nobody wishes to acknowledge. For the wealthy residents inhabiting Liverpool's elegant townhouses, the cellars might as well exist on another planet. They never smell the ammonia rising from down ground. They never witness the suffering. The horror remains invisible to those who benefit from the system that creates it. This darkness was not some natural disaster beyond human control. It was deliberately constructed through indifference and maintained through greed. Only after the death toll becomes so catastrophic that it threatens the empire's conscience do reforms finally commence. In 1848 and beyond, public health legislation rushes through Parliament. Cellar dwellings get officially prohibited as residences. Mountains of accumulated waste get cleared away. Modern sanitation systems begin taking shape beneath Liverpool's streets. Clean water becomes incorporated into urban planning rather than remaining a privilege for the affluent. Liverpool grows cleaner, safer, more livable. But examine the price extracted for these improvements. Reform arrives not from inherent compassion, but only after tens of thousands perish. New sewer lines get installed directly above mass graves. The cleanliness enjoyed by future generations is purchased with the brutal sacrifice of the generation before them. This raises an uncomfortable question about progress itself. Can a society claim civilization when it changes only after witnessing catastrophic death tolls? Does morality have meaning if it activates only when horror becomes too visible to ignore? The Liverpool black hole eventually gets buried beneath time's accumulation, but the lessons it offers about human nature remain disturbingly relevant. Today, modern technology allows us to reconstruct these forgotten tragedies, to give voice to the silenced victims, to illuminate darkness that powerful interests once concealed. Yet technology serves merely as a tool. Empathy determines whether such nightmares repeat or finally end. Liverpool survived by implementing changes paid for with nameless thousands of lives. That leaves us facing an essential question about our own era. Have the black holes truly disappeared from our world? Or have they simply evolved more sophisticated disguises? Look honestly at contemporary society. Where do you see similar patterns of invisible suffering, of convenient ignorance, of systems that consume the vulnerable while the comfortable look away? The answer matters more than we might wish to acknowledge. Walk through modern Liverpool today, and you'll encounter a transformed cityscape. Gleaming waterfront developments occupy the former docklands. Luxury apartments tower where coffin ships once unloaded their desperate cargo. The Albert Dock has metamorphosed into a tourist attraction, filled with museums, galleries, and restaurants. Visitors stroll these renovated spaces, snapping photographs and enjoying waterfront views, completely unaware that beneath their feet lie the bones of tens of thousands. No plaques commemorate the Cellar victims. No memorials mark the mass graves. The city has paved over its darkest chapter so thoroughly that even locals remain ignorant of what transpired in those underground chambers. This erasure was not accidental. Forgetting serves those who benefit from systems built on suffering. When we allow tragedies to fade from collective memory, we permit the conditions that created them to re-emerge, wearing different masks. The black hole of 1847 teaches us that societies don't collapse from single catastrophic events. They decay through accumulated small decisions, through bureaucratic indifference, through the daily choice to ignore suffering that doesn't directly affect us. Every official who dismissed the Cellar crisis as temporary, every landlord who profited from renting uninhabitable spaces, every citizen who averted their eyes from skeletal refugees contributed to the machinery of death. But here's what haunts me most about this story. Those officials knew better. The medical reports prove it. They possessed the knowledge and resources to prevent the catastrophe. They chose inaction because the victims lacked power, lacked voice, lacked value in the eyes of those making decisions. Strip away the historical details and you find a pattern that repeats across centuries. Vulnerable populations crammed into substandard housing, diseases spreading through overcrowding and poor sanitation, authorities blaming victims for systemic failures, wealthy populations remaining deliberately ignorant of suffering happening blocks away. So I return to the question posed earlier. Have the black holes disappeared, or have they simply learned to hide? Look at refugee camps, where families languish for years in temporary shelters that become permanent prisons. Examine urban slums where millions exist without clean water or adequate health care. Consider detention centers where human beings vanish into bureaucratic systems, stripped of names and reduced to case numbers. The mechanisms have grown more sophisticated, the justifications more elaborate, but the underlying logic remains disturbingly familiar. We still decide which lives matter based on wealth, nationality, and power. We still choose convenient ignorance over uncomfortable action. Liverpool's story demands that we develop what I call historical empathy, the ability to see past victims not as statistics, but as individuals who laughed, loved, and fought to survive, just as we do. Every person swallowed by those cellars possessed a name, a history, dreams they never fulfilled. They were not inevitable casualties of progress. They were sacrifices made because those with power decided their lives weren't worth the cost of intervention. Remembering them means refusing to let such calculations happen again. It means recognizing that civilization's true measure isn't found in architectural splendor or economic output, but in how we treat the most vulnerable among us when nobody's watching. The light you walk in today was bought with their darkness. Honor that debt by refusing to look away from suffering in your own time. The black holes are still here, waiting to be acknowledged. Will you see them?